So my name is Elizabeth Cardona. I've been working in CISA for, in this job for 3 years. I've been doing the KEV since before it was the KEV. I've been doing a lot of stakeholder specific vulnerability categorization since day one. So I've been doing this same job for 3 years. Before that, I was also in CISA, but in the threat hunting division. I was there for almost 2 years. And prior to that, I was a dentist and dental hygienist. So today I'm going to be talking about root canals, extractions, cleaning and flossing. So no, I'm joking. I'm going to talk about
There's a health worker recruitment fair right out there. So if this talk goes really bad.
I applied. So in case this goes bad and lose my job, I have a plan B. So next slide, please.
All right, next slide. Let's do it. Bonk.
So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the history of the KEV. So we have a few things that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the history. We're going to talk about the BOD, or the Binding Operational Directive 2201. We're going to talk about some case studies, and we're going to talk about the future of the KEV. So first, the history. I think everybody here probably know what the KEV is, but probably doesn't know where the KEV come from. So back in 2019, CISA co-sponsored a plan with the Software Engineering Institute to develop the stakeholder-specific vulnerability categorization. We use the stakeholder-specific vulnerability categorization in CISA to prioritize vulnerability response for the federal civilian executive branch, for the state, local, tribal, territorial governments, and for critical infrastructure entities. This SSVC is centralized, is based on the evidence, and it uses decision points. One thing that I love about SSVC is that it can be customized to the stakeholder needs. And for CISA, we use 5 decision points. We use the exploitation status, we use the technical impact, we use automatable, we use prevalence, and we use the public well-being. Within the exploitation status, we have 3 options. We have none, we have POC, and we have exploitation in the wild.
Proof of concept is.
Yeah, proof of concept.
And expand our acronyms. We can't be like super gov people.
I'm sorry, yes. And we have exploitation in the wild. When we started using SSVC, few months later, we find out that we have this huge list of CVEs, of vulnerabilities. They had exploitation in the wild, and that they were really important. So back in November 2021, we published that list as the known exploited vulnerability catalog, that what everybody knows today as the KEV catalog. However, it's very important to know that, I mean, now we know the history part. KEV comes from SSVC, but as the KEV was not possible without the Binding Operational Directive. Next slide, please. Got it? Perfect.
Yep.
The KEV is possible because this directive 2201. So very important to keep in mind. The KEV is part
Before this moment, how many in this room has ever heard of BOD 2201? All right, about 48%.
40. Okay, but that's good. That's excellent. Okay, so
we could probably speed through some. Well, I don't want to leave the other 52% behind. No, just keep doing it.
Okay, so, but it's very important that everybody makes the relationship between the KEV and the BOD, because what the BOD does is requires federal civilian agencies to remediate every single CVE that we add to the KEV. But it also recommends everyone to reference this list to manage their own vulnerability practice. Within that, I want to make a pause to make sure that everybody understands that because of the Binding Operational Directive, that's why not every single CVE that has been exploited is part of the KEV, because we don't want to add a CVE that has been exploited in your TV or your toothbrush or your refrigerator or stuff like that, right?
On the KEV. No video game cheats on the KEV.
Yeah. So just make sure that you keep that in mind. every time we add something to the KEV, it means actions the federal agencies has to take. We want to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars. We want to make sure that what we add to the KEV is very, very important. So
Right.
also
So
within
KEVs
that,
are like, if I may interject for one moment.
yeah, go ahead.
KEVs are possibly the most expensive vulnerabilities in America,
Yes.
because you do have like these agencies must find and fix them when we put it on the KEV, and that's like, so every bug is $1 million bug.
We have
What's up,
questions.
my dude?
Oh, I just don't understand why vulnerabilities on toothbrushes or TV are not a federal interest.
Because we don't have, the last time I checked, we don't have toothbrushes in the federal networks. So, I'm sorry?
Sure, it is. So the question is, so to repeat the question, how come we don't put toothbrushes on the KEV? And the follow-up was, isn't it in the public interest anyway? Yes, it is in the public
Yes.
interest. There are many, many other sources for vulnerability identification and remediation. All the other ones don't have to care about BOD 2201s. And so we care the most about things that have significant impact.
To the federal enterprise.
Say it with me. Significant impact to the federal enterprise.
Because of the
those are the ones we
relationship with
care
the bar.
about.
Yes.
So thank you. Sure, Jonathan.
Thank you. So 2 questions.
One question.
Oh, great. Wonderful. What is the, maybe you might be getting there, and if you're getting there, I'm sorry. What is the bar to exploitability? If you see exploitability in one case and you have one person reporting it.
This is like 25 minutes of this talk.
Okay, great.
We'll get there. We'll get
for it.
there.
Great.
Yeah, we're gonna go there. So also we have 3 criteria that every CVE must meet to go into the KEV. And number 1 is every vulnerability must have active exploitation. Must have a CVE. Why? Because we all need to speak the same language, and that language is a CVE ID. Second, every vulnerability must have reliable evidence of exploitation. Why? Because we want to eliminate false positives. We want to make sure that everything in the KEV is a real threat. And third, every vulnerability must have clear remediations, because we want to come to agencies with the problem, but also with solutions. And with that, I will pass to Todd so he can dive into the first criteria.
All right. Yes, go ahead.
I've got a couple of questions. Well, there's one person here and I got a question here.
All right.
How exactly does one agency make the determination of what hardware and software is used by all other agencies?
That is, oh, gee, like an entire other talk. The micro answer is, don't worry, CISA has lots of tools for figuring out what's in the rest of the federal executive civilian branch of the US government.
We have a
Those
magic
tools
wand.
are a different team. For starters, they use things like something called CIHI, which maybe somebody has heard of in this room. CIHI is cyber hygiene. It's a very fun way to say cyber hygiene. This is a voluntary program that lots of agencies can sign up for. We have other sources like CDM. We have some contractor work. We have loads of ways to like figure that out. But that is a great question, and we know more or less, but we do rely on agencies to do their own homework, right? So that's what it ultimately comes down to. And in the room, Monsieur.
Yeah. Easy. That is, my question is related to the previous one. So the previous one was about how do you know what hardware and software federal agencies are using? Perfect. And here you have defining a criteria about it has to have a CVED, etc. But on the previous line, you said subject to an executive level CISA review. So what is the actual that CISA review? What is the criteria that you guys use to look to a vulnerability and says this has to go on the KEV catalog?
Right. So the question is basically we have these 3 rules. The audience member noticed that we also have a caveat of, and also CISA has to review it. That's our job. So basically, we can't just like believe every Twitter rumor we hear. We can't believe every agency that comes in and says like, "Hey, we got owned by this." We'll get into like the exploitation evidence. That's a big part of our job. But we have an evidentiary review process in CISA. This is another reason why KEV tends to be a little bit slower than most other more predictive vuln analysis products. But yeah, so that's That's what that means. It doesn't mean like, oh, today I'm going to put this one on, and tomorrow maybe not that one. Like we don't. It's not arbitrary like that. Like we're all very evidence based and very human based.
It's not an
We have published criteria.
Yes, and it's not an
It's in the body.
automated process. It's not an automated process. We have to go through an analysis for every single CVE that we add to the KEV.
And
So
we have
it's a,
votes and we have bosses. One or two of
Exactly.
them are in the room
Yeah.
right now.
yeah.
Yeah, so let's move on. Criteria, thank you so much. Criteria number 1, CVE is identified. You would think this would be the easiest criteria to pass or fail on. Is there a CVE? Yes? Okay, well, maybe it goes on the KEV. Is there not a CVE? Call me when there is one. Turns out it's sometimes not that easy, right? So everybody in this room knows, probably most people on the internet knows, but I don't know, in the future, like when all of our grandchildren find this on like the old YouTube, you know, we will say the CVE program started in 1999. It was rad. It got more rad around 2014 and got federated. That's when I got involved in the CVE, coincidentally. It is now a more federated approach. It used to be like all MITRE and a little bit of Oracle and Microsoft. Now there's almost 400, 368 exactly today. CNAs out there issuing CVEs. So the likelihood that a vulnerability has a CVE is now a little bit higher, I think. And the stakeholders all over the place. Lots of vendors, lots of suppliers, lots of open source projects, lots of researchers, lots of other governments, government agencies in the US and governments around the world and beyond. Maybe the moon will give us some, I don't know. But anyway, the CVE lets us uniquely identify that vulnerability, the one we're talking about. If we were to put something on the KEV that didn't have, if we lived in a world without CVE, it would be a cluster, right? Like it would be really hard to figure out like what SQL injection are you talking about in Django or whatever, right? Like maybe it's one of several, but the CVED says like, oh, it's this one. CVED also lets you use all the tooling, right, for finding all of your vulnerabilities in your federal space and other spaces. We'll put a little pin in that. I keep saying federal space, but as many of you in this room know, lots of people other than federal government use the
Other
KEV.
spaces.
So anyway, so this is like a nice, open, clean identifier that we can use, right? And then it lets us like rely on the vendors and the researchers to tell us what they're talking about too, right? We don't have to do a bunch of that work. So that's all great. You'd think it'd be super easy, but what if there's no CVE, right? No problem. CISA is a CNA. We can create CVEs out of thin air. And it's super fun to do, but this is rare. So usually, like I say, usually something comes to us with a CVE, especially because we do all this research and work and all that. By the time we're ready to go, CVE is probably going to be there anyway. Sometimes things move fast. One example I have, we're at 116. Okay. One example I have off the top of my head, AKA on the first page of my notes, was CVE 2024-1709. Anybody heard of it? Know what the vendor is? Say it out loud. Oh man, this was like 3 weeks ago. You guys, it was ConnectWise, Screen Connect. It was a big deal. Vuln ConnectWise founded internally. They published some stuff about it. And then another researcher organization came along. That researcher organization is Huntress. They are great. We have good relationships with a lot of researchers, Huntress among them. And we worked with them and they said, hey, this seems like a big deal. People are going to like exploit it. And then they published some research, which was great. And I love it when they publish research. And then it got exploited like all over the place. It was super hard to ignore. But there was still no CVE because it was still super new. This was like day 2. So we're like, oh, dang. And so we asked Huntress, and Huntress was like, we asked MITRE. And we're like, okay, cool. Well, we have friends over in MITRE too. So we asked MITRE, and it's like, hey, how's it going? And we asked ConnectWise, hey, did you guys do anything? It gets to be like a little bit of a race condition because now everybody's talking about it and nobody knows what they're talking about. So we're like, okay, fine. We're going to use our authority as a CNA. We're going to issue a CVE. Well, we issued a CVE within 4 minutes of CVE 2024-27215, which you will not find on any CVE list because it was summarily rejected an hour later. We both MITRE and CISA issued a CVE for the same issue. Wah, wah, wah. That happens sometimes though, but that's okay because We ran with ours, Huntress ran with ours, ConnectWise ran with ours. MITRE was like, but guys, we had one. And we're like, sorry, you were faster, but we were more popular in this instance. So they beat us. Full disclosure. You can look it up in the JSON. I can't lie about this. They beat us by I want to say 4 minutes. It might have been 6 minutes. I know it was not 5 minutes. So, but it's one side or the other, right? Anyway, so ours got picked up, and mine was cool about it. Obviously, like, yeah, cool. Yeah, yours is good. And, you know, ours was shorter too. That was nice. So we ran with that. And so that's the story of how CVE 2024-1709 got on the KEV list when it started life without a CVE.
And how fast we added to the KEV?
I want to say it was like I want to say it was 3 days. That was pretty fast.
Since we knew about
Since we knew
the
about
whole process.
exploitation.
the
No.
whole
Since-
process.
yeah. Since patch release to KEV, I think it's 3 days. If I'm wrong, I'm sure someone will fact check me and tell you all I'm a big
That
liar.
was before it was public and everything.
Oh, it was hella public.
Okay, but
Yeah.
that's a perfect case scenario of like a perfect vulnerability disclosure process, perfect case scenario of going through the process, putting everything to the KEV on the right time, everything, right? But that sometimes
And 3
that-
days is fast for KEV.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna
sometimes
lie.
that doesn't happen because we have to go through a lot of analysis, a lot of making sure it's a patch, making sure we have to contact sometimes vendors, making sure the patch exists, making sure the patch works. So it has to
And we did all that in tandem while
exactly
dealing with this one issue.
So
We didn't-
that's-
and that's another thing too, right? We don't block on any one of these things. We're trying to do them
Yeah.
all like in serial. So
So
serial?
yes.
No, in parallel.
Yep.
All right. Let's go to the big one that everyone wants to talk about. Are you ready? Are you ready, Liz?
No.
No.
Okay.
Just do it in Spanish. It'll be fine.
Okay. So exploitation in the wild or active exploitation. ¿Puedo hacerlo en español? No.
En español. Sí, sí.
So criteria number 2. So I want to start by talking about 2 questions or misconceptions. So however you want to call it, that we get a lot. And is oh my God, I have my notes and so disorganized. Okay. The time frame of exploitation and the exploitation target. The time frame of exploitation. When we add stuff to the KEV, most of the times when we add stuff to the KEV is because the exploitation is happening at that moment. However, that is not the truth all the time. The KEV reference exploitation that it can happen in the past or in the moment, right? So let's say today is March 2024 and we add something from 2019 or 2020 or whatever it is. So it can't be that it's being exploited right now and we add it right now, but it could also be that it was exploited back then or like 2 years ago or a year ago, I don't know, whatever it is, but it just now is meeting the requirements to go in the KEV, and that's why we adding it right now to the KEV. So I want to make sure that everybody understand
Binding
that.
operational directive 2201
Thank
has
you.
no time bounding
Yes.
at all in it. Thanks.
Yes.
So it does introduce a little bit of weirdness sometimes.
Wiggle
But
room,
most of the time when you see something on the KEV, it's usually pretty
it's
current.
usually.
Every time when you see something on the KEV, we have current belief and evidence.
Yes.
And we could talk about like the whole difference between like belief, truth, and knowledge. Do you want to do that? We could just have a philosophy class
Yeah.
right now. But no, we believe that the thing is for real and poses a significant risk to the federal
Federal
enterprise.
Yeah. And the second thing is the exploitation target. And that's another thing that we get a lot of questions or misconceptions. And is that not every CVE in the KEV is being exploited against federal networks. We don't care where it was exploited. It could have been exploited in private sector, public sector. We don't care. Oh, we have a question?
Yeah, it's on the last bullet. Most but not all honeypot activity. Can you expand on that when you get to that point?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to read from the slide about what the criteria is for active exploitation for the KEV based on the binding operational directive. And that is reliable evidence that execution of malicious code was performed by an actor on a system without permission of the system owner.
No
Period.
consent.
Exactly. Yes. So our
Pen testing doesn't count.
our criteria for active exploitation is high. I'm not saying that the criteria for active exploitation of anyone else is wrong or right, and or like our
This is
criteria.
a huge point too, by the way. Like obviously you know how to talk, but keep going.
But it's our criteria is really high, because every time that we add something to the KEV, it's money. It's money that federal agencies have to spend. So we need to make sure that what we adding is real being exploited, right? So what doesn't, okay, so
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Where are you accepting this? Is this, are you trusting data from partners? Is it just like the government has to have evidence of this? Where is this evidence coming
Oh,
from?
we have that in the next slide.
Next slide. Man, it's like you're psychic.
Yeah. So what doesn't count as active exploitation? So public POC. So it doesn't matter if you
Merely public POC.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter if we have 100 POCs on GitHub. It doesn't matter if everybody.
I worked really hard on my Metasploit exploit.
I don't care.
No, but Liz, I worked really hard on it.
I know you love Metasploit. No,
I learned Ruby to write in Metasploit.
no, I don't care. I don't care if everybody's talking in Mastodon or Twitter, and it is the new hottest CVE and the block, and that everybody's saying that tomorrow is going to be exploited, on the next hour is going to be exploited. If we don't have the evidence, it's not going to go in the KEV. So we need the evidence, right? We don't do, the KEV is not to predict. We're not predicting any exploitation. It's evidence-based. So, oh, we have a question. Yeah.
Yeah, just a small one. Active exploitation means an instance of one, which should be enough to
It
get
could
on
be
the KEV.
one, it could be
but-
mass.
Will the KEV be updated when exploitation becomes widespread? Because that ups the priority quite severely.
Does it?
That's a good question.
So every KEV is sacred. They should all be patched. I will never tell you which ones to be patched first or last. You should be on all of them. I do have due dates on all the KEVs of usually 1 to 3 weeks. Yes, obviously, some bugs are better than others, right? Some exploits are better than others. So something is ripping across the internet. You don't need to know it on the KEV. You can read it on Security Weekly. You can read it on Recorded Future. You could read it on a million places. You can read it on Gray Noise. You can read it on Vulncheck. You can read it anywhere. So you will know if there's something that's ripping across the internet. The fact that it's on the KEV or not is immaterial, I'll say,
Yeah.
out loud on
When-
recordings.
Fair enough.
Yeah, when it goes on the KEV, it doesn't have like that into account. We don't take that into account. But like, yeah, public references are the best references. I mean, everything changed over time. And
In an
sometimes-
ideal world, the CVE would be updated with references.
Yeah, so
And let me put down my CVE board hat.
so the second thing that doesn't take into account when it comes to active exploitation, or it doesn't account as an active exploitation, is penetration testing. The other thing is scanning on inventory activities. Scanning is very, very common when we have a new CVE published that is hot and everybody's talking about, and then there's a POC published, and then everybody's like trying to see where this is hit or whatever, and then everybody talk about
And the Twitters are aflutter. Such and such is getting exploited in the wild all the time.
No, I don't get excited about that.
Don't get
I
excited.
need to see the evidence. And then honeypots. With honeypots, honeypots are great. However, not all honeypots are built the same, and not all the evidence in honeypots are the same. One good example that we went through the other day is we were reviewing some evidence in a honeypot about a CVE, and then we were like reviewing everything, and we like checkbox, everything's good. And then I was like, Todd,
I loved it. It was going on the KEV.
It was going on the KEV, like everything was like checkbox, yes, it's going on the KEV. And then I was like, Todd,
It wasn't just me. Those
this
two
source
dudes-
IP is the researcher who published the POC. It's the researcher who published the POC who's talking into this with the POC. This is not active exploitation. So it's like, so that's not active
Turned out the
exploitation.
researcher was not a criminal.
It's not a criminal. This is not
I can
I mean,
tell you,
criminal
so
activity.
as a researcher in another and current life, sort of sideways, cover your ears. Yeah, I want to know, like, my cool bug, how much is
Exactly.
on the internet, right? How much is exposed? So I'm going to sweep through. Generally speaking, obviously, I'm not going to violate the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act of 1984 as amended, but I will do what I can to search the internet for instances of my beautiful bug, right? Every researcher does this. Everyone does this.
And that was the only evidence we have. So we couldn't go by that, right? So, and then the other thing is like,
It looked exploity until we started considering the source, and then we said, hey man,
thank God. I
is this
mean,
you?
like,
Yeah.
we barely go only by honeypot evidence. That barely happen. We always have evidence from somewhere else. So it's like,
Honeypots rarely catch like post-exploitation
Yeah.
artifacts. So like TTPs, all that jet, like a web shell, right? Like now, maybe your honeypot is super cool, and I congratulate you. If you have a super cool honeypot that actually collects all the post-exploit stuff that can say like, yep, this is a bad guy. They definitely would have installed this cryptocurrency miner or whatever on my cool honeypot that's high interaction, and also I'm a good citizen and I have it sandboxed out and it wouldn't actually do it, but I caught the evidence. Then cool, then talk to us, right?
Yeah.
And that, I think that brings us to our next
Yeah,
slide.
to the next
Jonathan's
slide.
last question of what counts.
So when we talking about what counts of exploitation, we have to think about many different things. It's many caveats and the information we collect. So we have to look at the source of exploitation. We have to look at the type of evidence that we get. We have to look at the quality of the evidence that we get, because everything is different. The source of exploitation, I'm gonna start by saying like everybody here can be a source of exploitation. So
No, don't go exploiting things.
wait,
That's not like that.
No. I mean, like, no, I mean, if you
You
have,
may be the
if you have
source of
evidence, you can
exploitation
share it.
evidence, not the source of
So-
exploitation. Computer Fraud and Abuse Act.
So we collect, or we get information from everywhere. We get information from other agencies. We get information from the private sector. We get information from vendors. We get information from researchers. We get information from everywhere and anybody. So many
Confidential
different
sources, other governments, other parts of the government, other parts of this government, other parts of state governments, all over the place,
What's
right?
the fact that we have an email address where anybody can
We
just
do. KEV at
information to us.
CISA.dhs.gov. It'll be on the last slide. And
We
the slide that
still
sticks out.
gonna have a form to submit information to us about active exploitation. So if we can get
No, I
information.
can't wait for the form. Jay told me it would never happen, but we're on it. We're on the board. Jay says it's still not going to happen. So
we have a question.
what's up?
Can you go back one slide for a second? There
I
was something about the
suppose.
criteria
Yeah.
and the exploitation without the consent. So
Sorry, what's the question? Can you repeat the question in fewer
that
words?
was not the question. So attempted exploitation and successful exploitation. So if somebody comes to you with a POC, demonstrates to you the exploitation with the consent,
Sure.
will it get on the KEV or not?
Did I consent to the demo?
Yes.
Then no.
So aren't you shooting
If
yourself
you
in the
want to
foot?
go out and commit crimes, cool. I have also friends at the FBI. Now, I will say we never, ever, in my knowledge, I don't know everything about everything. CISA does not refer any vulnerability, exploitation, anything like that to the FBI. But man, if you're going to commit crimes like right in front of me, you make it hard.
Yeah.
So don't do that. But yes, POC is great. I want to know about the proof of concept. I want to know about the exploit. I want to know how it works. I want to know why it works. I want to know like what the target space looks like. I want to know everything about it, right? So that's super cool. I want to know that. None of that counts as evidence of exploitation. It's an evidence of an exploit as a noun, but not exploitation as an action verb. So that's the thing we care about. I care about bad guys doing bad things to other people's computers without consent.
Yep.
Sorry? That would not, so In the absence of exploitation by a bad guy doing bad things to somebody's computer without consent, I cannot add it to the KEV. Correct.
Yep.
I cannot hear you. We will move on.
Oh, we have another
But talk to me
question.
after.
Related question to that, please.
Yeah.
So I recognize that you want to make sure that it's been exploited in the wild before you put it in. Makes perfect sense.
Correct. It is exploited
Now,
in the wild before I
My
put it in. Yes.
question is, have you ever had a proof of concept that didn't result in an exploit in the wild?
Loads. So many. You wouldn't even believe it.
Okay.
Gosh, what's our backlog of like the maybes and the rumors? and
Oh
the
my God.
talk? Like it's
it's-
like 4 or 5 to 1. I'd say
Yeah.
it's huge. We have a
Yeah.
huge library
Yeah.
of exploits.
Another question.
Yeah, I know that these 2 slides are going to be the ones. Yes, Jonathan, what can I do for you? Oh, yeah, sure. Use my mic.
So, from history, right, we know that game theory, like getting a CVE has become a game. How is it not just going to turn into game theory, sort of like I want to get on the KEV list, and so I'm going to do stuff?
I worry about this a lot. When during I believe my interview process at CISA, I'm like, hey, you're creating a leaderboard, right? We deal with that in a later slide. But I will spoil it a little bit because we're at 1:35. Oh, we got a little bit of time. I'll spoil it a little bit. One of the ways to stop the KEV from becoming a leaderboard is the very controversial, I think it's fair to say, practice of we don't link out to researcher reports. We don't link out to first exploitation lists. We don't link out. So cool. Maybe you have like, you could do it like don't do this. You could do it in a kind of backwards way of like, okay, I have my CVE that is attributed to me, and now I get my CVE on the KEV by committing crime. So that's kind of the barrier to entry there. You have to be willing to commit crime. Please don't. Please don't. Please don't. Yeah. So anyway, that's one of the safeties we have in there. This is why we don't. This is a big reason, not the only reason, but this is a big reason why we don't link out to like researcher reports and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to say like, oh, Rapid7 has like 17 vulns on the KEV list. Aren't we cool? Because Tenable only has 16 or something that's dumb like that. I don't want that. Go ahead.
Hi, how do you incentivize companies that have been exploited to provide themselves as a proof of victimhood? Because I know a lot of people are hesitant to disclose that.
How do we incentivize people to give us the cool evidence? Liz? We asked nicely. Have you met Liz? She's delightful. Who wouldn't want to tell Liz all the evidence?
I have to say that the things have changed over time. Like in the beginning, a lot of people was like afraid to be in the KEV. Like in the beginning, a lot of people were like, oh my God, I'm going to be in the KEV. This is going to be bad.
Everyone's going to know that I have a bug.
Yeah, that I have a bug that was exploited. But I think over time, this has changed dramatically. And we have seen it with the collaboration that we got with the private sector. Like now, I think it's the opposite. I think now everybody is so into making the space more secure. Everybody's like wanted to do the best we can to collaborate with each other. And the collaboration has been a big factor to drive everybody into the same direction. And now actually we get the opposite perspective from the private sector. Actually, we got the other day, one of the vendors calling us and saying like, hey, why we don't have this CVE and the KEV? And then we were like, oh, well, we'll need a patch. We need mitigation.
We've had vendors say specifically, and I'll give you a hint. I think one of them's in the room right now. I think, I'm not sure. We've had vendors say specifically, it's like, hey, we need help amplifying this to our user base. We know there's exploitation. Here's the evidence. Here's the CVE. Here's all the stuff. We've crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's. Can you please put this on the KEV? Like, that's weird. And that is a change. That doesn't happen often, but it does happen sometimes.
Collaboration with the private sector, I have to say it, and I have to emphasize on that. It's been huge. I mean, I've seen the difference, and it's huge. And we depend on the collaboration. I mean, CISA is big on collaborating with the private sector, and we depend on collaboration with the private sector. And that's what we want. We want to make friends with the private sector, because at the end we will win. We will win
And
if
we can
do this
appeal to
together.
patriotism and all that, right? But also, it's the right thing to do and a tasty way to do it.
Yeah.
Do we have anything else on this slide before we get another question? Oh, you have a question.
No,
Come on, let's
I
do that.
love
wait,
both
we have
exploitation
an online
evidence.
question.
That's the
Yeah,
best.
we have an online question.
Okay.
And the question was, what are your sources for execution of malicious code?
Are all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah.
Rewind 5 minutes and watch that again. I mean, they're really all over the place. It's private
some of
sector.
them.
It's so victims do come in. Managed service providers actually are pretty nice. They will help out. It's all dependent on whatever their agreement is with their customer. We do not want customer data, private data, anything like
Yes.
that. We
Yes.
don't require that for
We
evidence.
never get.
You want to
private-
doctor up your logs and like get rid of the customer name? Cool, do it. Are you lying to me? Are you giving me for some reason some false information about exploitation? So I'll put your thing on the KEV, maybe because you want to be on Jonathan's cool leaderboard. Don't. And no one does that. No one has done that yet.
No.
Watching. But we get it from government agencies. We get it from, so I would say the majority of it, I would say probably half and half of like
Researchers.
half and half and half.
Security.
150% of our,
cybersecurity
yeah.
companies. Yeah.
yeah,
It's everywhere.
it's everywhere. It's
everywhere.
actually really hard to
Really
pin it
everywhere.
down to a group. Vendors are a big one. So like when Microsoft says, hey, we know this is exploited in the wild.
Yeah.
We're like,
Vendors
cool.
are a big source.
Yeah.
The vendors are a big source, and
Yeah.
we believe the vendors. I mean, we don't have any reasons why not to believe the vendors.
Yeah.
I mean, the vendors. Who knows the product better than
Yeah.
their own vendor?
But they have
right?
instrumentation often. They have customers often. Microsoft is a great example because like they run the whole Azure thing, right? And so they will have that instrumentation.
They usually have firsthand evidence and stuff like that. So yeah, it comes from everywhere.
All right.
We had another question
We
here.
got 20 minutes to go. Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
A quick question with regards to the evidence of exploitation. What's the take on transparently sharing that evidence either with the vendor that is primarily affected or publicly?
Ooh, that's a good question. So the question was, what's our deal with sharing evidence with the responsible vendor, essentially?
Well, it all depends from where the evidence comes from and who requests the evidence, right? Because we haven't get to that situation where.
Are you familiar? Who in the room
Like-
is familiar with the TLP color scheme?
Yeah.
A lot. All right. So if you're not familiar with that, TLP is traffic light protocol.
Yeah.
Clear, green, amber plus strict, red, other polka dot, right?
So if
Like,
anybody
so-
shares any information with us, right?
and they
And
fail
then-
to market TLP, we will
Exact-
ask them almost immediately.
And then everybody comes
Hey.
to us requesting that information. We always go to the source and say, hey, can we share this information? Is this what
Yeah.
the TOP restrictions or whatever it is? So we
try real hard.
play that middleman.
Yep.
And then we make sure that every party is in
Yeah.
like agreement of whatever it is. But we don't go. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, don't send
doesn't
anything,
happen.
obviously, that you don't ever want discovered ever, right?
Yeah.
Because, unless like other things are happening, because, I'm a government employee and, it's kind of your information. So yeah, let's go. Yes, sir. Right there. Oh God.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
So
All right. Rapid fire.
about 20 minutes ago or so, you said that your sources of information were federal government, states, etc. And now we're talking about vendors.
Yep.
Now.
Yep.
And then you also, I think it was in a slide too, you were like, this is the evidence that we collect and we check as part of our decision process. Now, if we consider your different sources of information and that evidence, have you ever thought about applying a confidence level to any report?
The question is, do we apply confidence levels to the exploitation evidence that we create? And we do through the course of voting and
Yeah.
raising it up. If there's a question about the evidence, like that tends to get shaken out during our analysis. If there's like a big obvious question, we're just dumber
Oh, and we
heads,
question a
we
lot.
missed it. There's a couple of people in this room will say like, hey, are you sure? And then they'll ask, but like every time something gets added to the head, it added to the KEV, I would say it passes by at least 70 or 80 pairs of eyeballs on the
Yes.
first pass.
Yes.
So
Yes.
like lots of chances to catch errors.
It's a whole it's a whole
Yep.
process that we
Now,
go
do we
through.
like mark everything low, medium, high? Not really. And
It's-
the analyst notes will say like, this is pretty good. This is great. We use pretty good, like in the pretty good privacy set. I do, so I'm sure it's super confusing when no one else does. But yeah, we'll rate it like in the analysis notes.
But it's not an arbitrary
Yep.
decision ever.
Can you just talk quickly about how you validate physical vulnerabilities versus network vulnerabilities?
Oh boy.
They make up about a quarter of the KEV list, and that's where I've always had a question.
All right. The question is, how do we validate physical vulnerabilities versus network vulnerabilities? And I think you mean local vulnerabilities. All right. Yeah, I'm like, whoa, we have quarter are physical? That's crazy. No, local is like privilege escalation, essentially. Yeah, almost all. If you look at the KEV list, you'll see like almost all hashtag boy, someone should do research on this. Almost all of the local issues are going to be like privesc from like local user to administrator, administrator to system, something like one of those, right? For other things that are local, I mean, I can't think of many examples off the top of my head. But yeah, same as anything.
Same way.
Logs, attestation from the victim, evidence of like post exploitation.
That's what
like real close in time, right?
post exploitation evidence is usually the best evidence that we can get, because that get us closer to, like I always say,
What's the
like
time at?
if we
2
get the
o'clock?
body, like
Okay, we got 15
murder,
minutes. We're still very.
and that's what we like to get. So
I know. I asked,
I
but
know.
let's.
I think
We're gonna.
Ines-
I'm next
yeah.
anyway. But yeah, we'll take the 2 questions. If they are answered later, I will tell you that. If I'll try to be fast. All right, go.
Okay, so I want to check my understanding. So you're telling me if I create an exploit
Uh-huh.
for a popular piece of software,
Uh-huh.
but I never use that against a BOD 2201 organization,
Okay.
I will stay off
I
the KEV
have a
list.
note there. Go ahead.
I will stay off the KEV list.
Incorrect. And I'll tell you why. Do I tell you why in 3? No, I think I'll tell you why later. Anyway, I'll tell you why right now. No need to save spoilers. The agencies that must pay attention to BOD 2201 are federal, civilian, executive branch agencies. Places where the thing is exploited. So like you're a bad guy and you exploit, I don't know, the great state of North Carolina today. You exploit the great company of MasterCard, then I still care, because MasterCard is, first off, it's in the financial sector, which is one of the 14 critical infrastructure. But that's one kind of lame reason. Basically, if it's a place, if it is a entity and a network that if talking to it and getting like infected or whatever in like a wormy way, it poses significant risk to the federal enterprise, which is the thing, that's when I start to care, right? So if you pop MasterCard and now a bunch of my American citizens are now running around getting owned, that's a big deal for me, right? Because they're going to be interacting with the federal enterprise. There's going to be employed, like, it doesn't have to be the US. It doesn't have to be the US. Like if you pop the great country of New Zealand, like I care a lot about that. I am.
Target-
okay. Atlassian. If you pop Atlassian, which lives in Australia, last I checked, I still care, and you will find Atlassian bugs on there. Go ahead.
We're target agnostic.
We're target agnostic.
Yeah.
And so now, does that mean every toothbrush and refrigerator? To
No.
answer the question that was asked, I think 37 minutes
the
ago.
toothbrush. I do care about the toothbrush.
You care about the toothbrush.
because I was
You're a dentist,
but
so that doesn't count.
not for the KEV.
So our allowed target list for the KEV, if you want to reverse it, right, is much broader than just the US government. That's the thing I really want to drive home. They still have to be pretty cool targets. Like they have to be useful targets to the attacker, targets that matter to the US government. So like allies matter, big companies matter, little companies matter that do a very niche thing. I can like, oftentimes we will, it's occasional that we'll kick something out because it's like, oh, it's in a critical, or let's say like, oh, it's like a water pump or something, but no one uses it except for this one utility in Costa Rica, right? Like maybe that would not get on the KEV. We'd probably call them anyway, though. We have
And
other ways of
it is
signaling interest, by the way.
Case
other
by
than the KEV.
case. It's a case by case. Like I
You'd
said,
have to be pretty small potatoes to
not-
not get on the KEV.
nothing in the KEV is arbitrary. Nothing. No decision for the KEV is arbitrary. So everything that we add to the KEV has to go through a process of analysis. Everything on the KEV will go not only to a process of analysis, but also to a process of approvals. So, I mean, everything is case by case. Something that we may consider today, oh, this, well, probably we're not gonna add to the KEV today. Then we may get information tomorrow and we were like, oh no, we need to add this to the KEV because of whatever we found that this specific product was used and I don't know, somewhere that was important. So we added to the KEV. So it's not static decisions. It's not arbitrary decisions.
Have no list.
It's a lot of human involved decisions on this.
Let's get to the next question. Thank you. That is a hard question. and
Yeah.
an interesting question, and I'm happy to talk to you more later in 11 minutes. Go ahead.
Once the CVE is on the KEV list, does it ever get removed? If so, what's
The question is, how do you get things off the KEV? Is that the short version?
That's not the intention, but what
Okay.
I'm saying is once it's in the CVE in the KEV list, like, have you ever removed one? And if so, what was the criteria? Does it ever get removed at all?
Gotcha. The question, have we ever moved anything from the KEV?
Yes.
Yes. And-
Okay,
And
so-
what was the product, Liz?
That you don't make me pronounce that word because I cannot pronounce that word.
Go ahead.
So,
Go ahead.
ow.
Meeting owl.
I cannot pronounce that word. Okay. So
Yes, we have removed things from the KEV. Go ahead.
And the only reason why we would remove something from the KEV is because it doesn't meet the criteria of the KEV. So it could be that for some reason, the patch is not good anymore, or because the patch will break something, and we will talk about.
Or we done goofed. It happens.
Oh, what?
Or we done goofed. We messed up or there was
Oh.
something weird in the evidence and we believed it at the time. Now we
Yes.
don't believe it anymore.
And yeah,
It's usually
because
the reason.
Like I said,
But
because
and by usually I mean in the 2 or 3 times we've ever removed
just-
anything.
it
from the
just
KEV.
has
like
been-
it's very rare.
yeah,
Because we
it's-
usually don't goof.
yes, and it's
but
because
sometimes we
we got the evidence was there, but later on we got another set of evidence and we were like, no.
Aw dang.
Yes, so we need to remove this. So and that's actually show the transparency that we have. We could be just like, oh, leave it there, right? But what we don't want to do that. We don't want to do any disserve to the public or to federal agencies. We want to be transparent. And we try to be 99.9% right. I don't want to say 100%, but I want to be 99.9. But yes.
99.99, please.
Yeah, 99.9999%.
3, I think.
But if something doesn't meet the requirements at one moment for any of the 3 requirements, then we will remove it. But that doesn't happen. It just happened that time, and we hope it doesn't happen again.
Thank you. I love telling people how I screwed up. All right. Criteria number 2, part 3, attribution. See, I told you this would be the longest one. Attribution issues. So did we cover all this through questions? I think we basically covered all this, right? So just to reiterate, the KEV doesn't cite, nor does it link to sources of exploits, sources of exploitation. We don't link to published or confidential research because that would be crazy. It would stop being confidential. We don't link to indicators of compromise or TTPs. Should we? Maybe. It's not in the bod. And so, and we, like, yeah, threat actor agnostic. I knew you ripped that off from somewhere and you ripped it off from here in the future. All right. We have some example stories that I do want to tell. Oh yeah, we'll tell this one. So CVE 2024-23897, type fast. This was a Jenkins file read bug from a week ago, 2 weeks ago, something like that. Jenkins bug got exploited in the wild everywhere. It wasn't exploited. This thing was, as far as we can tell, as of yesterday. I haven't looked today. Sorry, I'm at VolCon. But as of last night, I haven't seen any exploitation evidence that said that anyone was using this cool Jenkins bug to actually exploit anything. The best evidence we've gotten so far, and we've gotten lots of people coming in. More now because we keep telling people, please send us evidence. So now we get bad evidence, and now we have to do that too. And they say like, look, check it out. They're exercising the vulnerability, and they totally stole my Etsy password file. I'm like, yeah, that's the POC. They only get the first line of your Etsy password file. The first line of everyone's Etsy password file is root:x:, blah, 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 blah. Like, it doesn't give the attacker anything. This is a scanning. This is a case where, I'm not a lawyer. And when I start sentences like that, he gets real nervous. So I'm going to end that sentence right there. But this is a case where someone is exercising a vulnerability, let's use that word, to determine whether or not there is a target out there. So that's like kind of a perfect case of someone where everyone else is going to say exploit, and you should say exploit. You have customers, you have constituents, you have all kind of people who rely on your early warning systems. You should tell people, hey man, bunch of people are out there triggering the vulnerability and finding targets. You want to patch this right now, and you should do that. We should do that. We're not going to do it in the KEV. We'll do it in other agency announcement. Thank you so much. We have other ways to do this. KEV is not one of them. If you want to learn more about that, go to CISA.gov and hit search, I guess. I don't know. This is a KEV talk, not a CISA talk. So that's one great example. I'm surprised. I think I've probably talked to you all. See, I knew it after lunch. Everyone's getting quiet now. All right. Effective mitigations. This is me too, right? All right. Effective mitigations. What counts? Almost always when you read the KEV, you will see that we're going to tell you, hey, apply the updates provided by the vendor. If you can't, take the thing off the network. End of sentence. This counts for most everything. This is also, like CVE, is pretty easy usually. Sometimes things get weird though. If you get like, the story's too good. You should just jump into the story of things that don't count for effective mitigation. TLDR, if there's a patch and it's easy to apply and you don't have to jump through a bunch of hoops and do a bunch of configuration, cool, you're going on the KEV. If you're crazy complicated and you're going to make people do 3 days of work, you're not getting on the KEV.
Or break something else. Yeah. Who knows about Black Lotus?
Black Lotus, yes or no? Ooh, not
I know.
Oh, you guys should read up about Black Lotus.
Yeah.
Ongoing
So
train wreck.
that's a perfect example of why something is not going to go into the KEV. It has a
not yet. Anyway.
Not yet. Yeah, thank you, Todd. It has a CVE ID. It has active exploitation. It does have a patch. However, the patch is not finalized. I don't know if everybody remembers, but it started in 2022, back in January as CVE 2022-1894. Later in, oh my God, I need glasses. May 2023, the patch, it was insufficient for that one that I just mentioned. And then May 2023, it was published as CVE 2023-4932, security feature bypass affecting Microsoft Secure Boot. It was exploited in the wild with the Black Lotus UEFI bootkit.
Most definitely exploited.
It was exploited. However,
in our definition.
Yes. However, the patch is going to be released in 4 stages. We still in the second stage. Microsoft, I believe, is going to be releasing the 3rd stage of the patch in April 2024. And the final stage is going to be released in September or October of this year. And the
it's bonkers.
Mitigations are complicated.
Very complicated. Should you fix should you fix these bugs in your environment? Absolutely.
You should. We issue an advisory alerting everybody about it and say, hey, you should mitigate this, but it doesn't meet KEV requirements because the mitigations are not clear. This is basically a clear sample of like the cure is worse than the disease. I mean, you can basically break everything. This affects every Windows, even Linux systems that rely on secure boot. So this is a good example of why sometimes we have to stay away from adding something to the KEV, even though it meets the requirements to go into the KEV, but we need to wait until the full patch is available.
Well, it meets 2/3 of the requirements. Yeah.
Yes, at least
So-
until November, and in November it will go into the KEV, but for now
Probably.
it's not going to go
Yeah.
into the KEV.
All right. Here's a slide about things that are not KEV appropriate. It's boring. We have, I believe, like 65 seconds left. But yeah, if it's secure by design problem, it's their problem. If it's BOD 2302, which is my other favorite BOD, my second favorite BOD, when you have your control plane exposed to the internet, that's that thing. That's not my thing. If you have a bug in damn vulnerable web app, don't tell me about it. I know. It happened. And then that's it. We just want to fix stuff. We want to fix stuff in the government, and everyone else is happy to come along for the ride. Here is a QR code. You should definitely scan it right now. This QR code will take you to an article on the Federal Register. The Federal Register currently has a comment period open for the KEV specifically, and tell Jay how much you want this form. Put it there. If you do that, maybe I'll get the form. That's right. Yeah, these are things we want, kind of. Yes, sure. We're thinking about it. I think it's kind of a no-brainer to put CWEs, decorate KEVs with CWEs. Why not? You can find it your own way. I've done it, it's not hard to like do a, union on a table, but we should publish it. It should be there, right? We want to tag things by target. I want to know at a glance which one of these are edge network devices. That would be cool to know. Again, this is all kind of stuff that other companies can do. Thank you, sir. Other companies are doing. But we feel like we could probably dress up KEV more. I want to dress up KEV more. I love nothing more than telling people about vulnerabilities. It's like my favorite thing. I've done it for my whole life. I've done it for more than 60% of my life. So that's it. If you have any questions, too bad. Or find me, because I'll be around. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for giving me all your questions.
Thank you.
And all you guys, tell me your evidence. Give me your evidence. It's right here. kev@cisa.dhs.gov. Email me. Tell me about the vulns. I'll tell other people about them. I'm not going to keep a secret. All right. Thank you, sir.